Today we will be continuing down the AFI's Top 100 list with the blockbuster, maybe the first blockbuster ever, Jaws, directed by Steven Spielberg and still to this day considered one of the scariest movies ever created. How you doing, Noah?
I'm excellent, Daniel. How are you?
I'm doing really good, and I just got done watching Jaws. What are your initial reactions to this? How did it hold up after all these years?
I loved it. I loved the movie. I thought it was so much better than I was expecting. I was really ready for like a kitschy kind of horror movie. Haven't seen it since I was 14 years old. Also watched it with Emily. She was terrified the entire time, so I think that it does hold up today.
I was really surprised by that because I went in like remembering how much it scared me as a kid, and I was like, it's not gonna scare me now. I'm a grown man. I pay taxes, and nothing's scarier than that. But it actually really got like my blood pressure up at several different points. There's also very striking visuals and imagery at various points that just like whoa, like it was gory and impactful.
Like, how about like the first girl getting eaten and you just see the blood like bubbling through the ocean, or the man when Marty Hooper dives in to go check the boat for something, and he goes in and we're looking and there's like no music, so you know the shark's not coming, but then the head like rolls into the hole. That made me scream. I screamed like a little girl.
So, okay, for our audience, real quick, could you give a brief synopsis in case someone somehow doesn't know of what Jaws is?
Absolutely. Jaws is the 1975 summer blockbuster that follows three men, Marty Hooper, Chief Sheriff Brody, and Quint, the salty seaman, as they go on their quest for vengeance after a man-eating shark that has been terrorizing the summer town of Amity.
Yeah, and I had completely forgotten about the B plot of this mayor who was just like refusing to like just trying to get more and more tourism for the town. Like it's the most important thing to the point where he's like, shark attacks. What are you gonna do?
The mayor's like the villain in the movie. I really don't want to dwell on COVID during this one, but I could not help but feel like there were some parallels, like when it's July 4th and he's like, well, there's a man-eating shark on the loose, but it's a summer town, we gotta make a profit. And I felt the same way, like, with July 4th during, like, any of the holidays during the pandemic have been like, please don't make this more of a pandemic. And people are like, but the economy.
What I loved about that, though, was like, I know I completely erased it from my mind when I was a kid because it's like the most boring thing to a kid without the movie of Jaws. Like, you don't care about this tourism thing. But yeah, now that I'm an adult, I kept like drawing parallels to people I know who are that dumb and that like, nearsighted when it comes to possible tragedy.
If I could, I'm going to steal part of Emily's corner. Emily's notes regarding the politics in the movie and the general economy, that kind of B plot were... Ugh, politics, am I right?
Emily, for those of you who are aware, is Noah's fiance. Picture of her, also here.
Oh my god, okay, speaking of the mayor though, he gets reelected in Jaws 2. Like, he's still the mayor in the second one.
Which makes no sense whatsoever. Several people die as this gargantuan man-eating shark is terrorizing this small tourist town. But there's also this like underlying tension when it comes to being able to maintain it's one of the first monster movies where they didn't show the monster much. And in hindsight, with knowing what we know about shooting the film, it's largely because showing the shark was so freakishly difficult. But it was such a smart and effective utilization of this monster that what you end up with is every single time the shark is actually on screen, it's terrifying. Like, even the weird kind of wonky shots that haven't aged perfectly because you can, like, really see it's an animatronic, they still are kind of scary, though. Like, even if I was like, that looks bad, I was more like, that doesn't look... It looks a little bad. It looks a little bad.
I'm so glad you brought up the point about tension and the part about the... So did you know that there were 3 sharks that played Bruce? That is the name of the shark, is Bruce.
Named after Steven Spielberg's lawyer, famously.
Absolutely. Glad that you plugged that in there. So there were 3 different sharks used throughout the film for various different shots. But I'm so glad you brought up the idea of tension throughout the film, because I think that's one of the things that Steven Spielberg absolutely excels at in this film is like, yeah, you are scared when you hear the music, when you like see the shark. But the times that I felt like the most tense were when the music wasn't playing, just like waiting for that next shark attack. It feels like every scene is set up so that someone is like about to get eaten.
Funny, I even found myself kind of scared and tense in scenes where they're on land. Like, I was expecting the shark to, like, barrel through a wall or something. I was like, wait, there's no serial killer. There's no actual tension on land, but they would be, like, in an office, and I was like, the shark could just, like, come in through the window. Like, I don't know why.
Emily, we had to pause the movie last night. She was like, I would like to use the bathroom before I'm too scared at the toilet.
But that's just like, it goes to even the limitations of the time and the limitations of the animatronic not being easy to work with. True masters of their craft can still make the art they're trying to build effective. This actually did win an Oscar for best editing, and I damn well deserved it, because like there's all these long drawn out shots. They do let you see the fin, they do let you see like certain gore, but it always just, it ends pinpoint on the right moments, if that makes sense. All the attacks, the build up, the reaction shots, even there's just never any, there was never an emotion being conveyed to me that overstayed its welcome at all.
In terms of editing too, or like one of my favorite shots is when they're sitting on the beach. Sheriff Brody is like on the beach, and someone says that the shark isn't, they've seen a fin in the water or something, and Brody realizes that his son is in the water, and you get that classic shot of like it zooming in on his face as like the scenery behind him kind of like expands and gets like farther away. Spectacular editing. Steven Spielberg didn't even think, like when he finished the movie, he was like, oh my God, it's gonna get panned. Like he thought he had done a terrible job. And then it went on to win several Oscars, one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about was the music. Like possibly the biggest character in the movie is the actual screenplay, and John Williams won an Oscar for that, for Jaws.
It's John Williams apparently credits it for jumpstarting his career and making him a household name because of that just oh so famous dun 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 dun. I mean, it's maybe the most iconic two notes in cinema, right? Like you will someone can just do it once, dun, and you get it. It's funny because that was actually like they didn't know if that would work either. It's one of the elements that's become so iconic that was just apparently when Steven Spielberg, according to IMDb, first heard it, he went, oh, okay, but what's like really the monster score? Because he just thought it like wasn't actually like anything.
That's the information that I got too. He was like, okay, this is a joke, but like where's the real soundtrack?
And apparently like the most infamous line was also ad-libbed. We're gonna need a bigger boat is totally off the top of the dome. It's incredible to me that this seems to be one of those movies that, yes, it was very well made, but at the same time, it just happened to be all these stars aligning to craft what became the tone setter for thrillers. And it's maybe the most ripped off movie in the history of cinema too. Many classic films were originally even pitched as like, it's Jaws, but in space. That was Alien for its pitch. It's so influential. It was so big, but I will also say it has spawned the most crap. Not only the Jaws sequels, but a lot of the things that rip it off.
I think that one of the things that Jaws does exceptionally well that some of like the modern horror films don't do as well is that it actually makes you care about all of your main characters, right? So I kind of feel like in some of the slasher films of today, you're almost like rooting for the people to die, and then when they do eventually die, there's like this almost gratification. You're like, oh, thank God, the guy who suggested splitting up in the middle of a night in a creepy forest, not knowing the terrain, having no mode of communication, like got his comeuppance, like he died, thank goodness. But in this movie, one of the things that Spielberg does really well is like you get a picture of the sheriff's family, you get a picture of his home life, you get the backstory of why Quint hates sharks, and you even start to care about your lovable like oceanographer, Marty Hooper. And so like anytime someone dies, it feels like there's weight to it. Even the first girl who died, Chrissy, she and the boy that she goes to hook up with, her skinny dip, whatever, they're not even doing anything wrong, right? There's no like clear and present danger. Whereas in other slasher films, it's like, you know the monster's out there, you know it's trying to get you, and they still do something stupid. So you still feel for Chrissy because she's just trying to have a fun night, and she gets brutally eaten by a shark. But Steven Spielberg totally cared about the quality of the movie and caring about the characters. So if you're not familiar, it's based off of a book by Peter Benchley. And Spielberg, when he was adapting the screenplay, was like, and he caught some flack for this from the author, because the author is in the movie. He was like, this is a bad book. Like, there's a lot of elements of this. Like, I need you to change these and make me care about the characters. And Peter Benchley was like, you're 22 too. Like, what the hell do you know?
He was a novice at this point.
But it worked though. Like, he was right. Like, I do feel like I can't speak on having read the book, but I do feel like I care about the characters, and I think that was something that Spielberg did really intentionally.
Well, Spielberg, despite actually producing quite a few duds in his career, people just like to sweep those under the rug and pretend like they didn't happen and hold him up as like a flawless director. When no, he's had some mistakes. I think even when he does blunder, you can still tell it's someone who, one, is crazy passionate about the art form, and two, is technically very talented. And this is just one of those stories that ties into what I think Steven Spielberg manages to do best as a director, and that's that he gives you a lot of just even people who are not characters' reaction to what's happening. I mean, the beach scenes are so stressful at times, and it's because he's really showing the motion of everybody. He'll hold on a random extra, like there's this one attack where he really holds on this one kid and repeatedly shows the kid becoming more and more upset, and it affects you, the viewer. And Steven Spielberg just understands the little things like that I feel like a lot of directors today just actively ignore. Like, they don't care to show you everyday people's reactions. And I think it's also why he makes E.T. so effective and things like that, because you always see the wonder or the terror of what's happening reflected in more than just the immediate.
That's a really perceptive comment, I think, that you made, because that's something that you see throughout the film, definitely. And one of my favorite scenes, I think, that does that is when they have the town hall meeting. One of the things that you get in that scene is a lot of like background noise. So when they say that they're going to shut down the beach, even just for like 24 hours, when the sheriff says they're going to shut down the beach, you get this uproar, and you hear actual like conversation and actual sort of complaints from the entire room. And if you listen to it, if you rewatch the scene, you hear a woman complaining that I think she's like, 24 hours, that's like 3 weeks. And other people in the background are all having their own personal grievances with that. And so you get this sense that it's like, it's a real town. There are real business owners and people who care about the economy of the town. You feel like the town all of a sudden has this three-dimensionality.
Well, it ties into what I was saying. Like, you could pull away all the thriller scenes and there's still a compelling, like, I care about what's happening to these people, where if you take, a dumb slasher that's ripping this off, like so many were, their entire story, everything hinges on you have to care about the thrills. Whereas this feels like such a lived-in real place, and it's shot in such a human way that I think if you did a cut of Jaws that took out all the kills, I would still watch it. But that does take me to talking about maybe the most, I want to say, successful climactic showdown with a monster I maybe have ever seen. I love the final battle, essentially, that unfolds after the shark cage is destroyed between our heroes and Bruce, which is such not a shark name, but okay.
I think it's the perfect shark. I mean, maybe it's because it's probably because I saw Nemo before I ever saw Jaws. So now I can only, and Bruce is the name of the great white in Nemo, which I feel like has to be an intentional reference.
Oh,
right?
yeah, it has to be.
But now I can only associate the name Bruce with sharks. So I respectfully disagree. I can only think, I'm like, wow, Bruce, that's such a great shark name. I wonder how they came up with that.
I always think of Adam West's Batman when I think of the name Bruce. I don't know why, so that's just immediately I picture Adam West voicing the shark.
I thought the final battle scene was incredibly well done. And possibly my favorite part about that scene, two of my favorite parts. One, Sheriff Brody like slowly sinking on the mast, like as he's like gradually sinking into the water, and just get like missing those shots, and you're just waiting for it. You're waiting for the tank to blow up. But the thing that I thought that Spielberg and Williams did so well with that scene is, so far every time that a shark attack is about to come, it's been preceded with that da dun da dun da dun da dun. You have the score, and so you start to associate that music with an impending shark attack. And the climax of the movie is I think the only time where you don't get that prior to the shark attack. And so all of a sudden it's just like, bonk, like, the shark biting down on the boat. And you're like, whoa, that came out of nowhere. Like, it's terrifying.
Well, you talked about how great of a shot seeing him sink in is. One, completely agree. And they got to be able to do those wide, beautiful shots without blowing up their budget, because they were actually in the ocean filming this, which is not common. You usually just have a giant tank and you fake it and it looks great. But during this time, you couldn't do that nearly as well. And they're also just They're just out in the ocean, which also, like, if I was one of the actors, that would scare the hell out of me. I'm a scuba diver, but the ocean is not a place where, you know, you can just be totally at ease. And then there's also this giant fake shark, which for my baby brain would kind of scare me a little bit still. So I can't imagine for these actors, there isn't a little bit of like, as you're slowly actually descending into the ocean. Yeah, you're kind of like, my butthole's clenched.
I'm so glad that's a really good thing that you mentioned about them being in the ocean. He wanted you to have the sense of actually being in the ocean. So they did. And one of the reasons that they used Martha's Vineyard was because it's only like the max depth is 30 feet for like a mile out from shore. So they could go, and that was one of the only ways that you know that you could get the underwater shots was because it wasn't terribly deep. I'm not saying that I want to be the actor who has to slowly sink into like the merciless ocean, even if it's only 30 feet deep. Like 30 feet's still deep.
You can drown in 30 feet of water.
You can drown in like 2 tablespoons of water.
No, but you can blow away to what? That is the what?
Fuck off. I'm looking it up.
Please stand
How
by.
much water do you need to drown? All right. Fuck me. In some cases, it can take as little as a half cup of water to enter the lungs for the phenomenon to occur.
Please explain to me why this was worth all this time you just put into this. And now we're gonna cut to Emily's Notes of the Week, a new segment we hope to continue.
Jaws, a movie about sharks by Emily Lowry. The first scene, they indicate that the woman's name is Chrissy. And Chrissy sounds like fishy, indicating that she will be the first eaten by the shark. This is very obvious foreshadowing. Ladies, immediate life lesson when we watch this movie. If you scream loud enough, a man still will not save you. He will be too drunk and pass out on the beach. One of the main takes of this movie is very prominent throughout is just politics, am I right? And I mean, it ruins the entire movie. Then I stopped taking notes for a really long time because I was shockingly terrified by the movie. Wasn't expecting to be terrified by it, so I then wrote a subtle plea to my journal and said, Jaws is very scary. I was wrong. It is not kitschy, and I'm so sorry, universe. Please do not let me have nightmares tonight. Please and thank you. My final and compelling note of the film is that you should clearly ask people what their trauma is before you commit to being stranded on a boat with them in the middle of the ocean. This man, I don't even remember his name. Quint clearly was fueled by this revenge to hunt these sharks, so much so that he smashed their only lifeline for rescue and safety because he was so traumatized by these sharks at some point in his life, which is just something I feel like you should let your passengers know before you let them commit to being on a boat with you hunting a deadly shark. Those are the takes from Emily's Corner. Thank you, and please enjoy.
I want to talk a little bit more about Steven Spielberg and John Williams in this film, because this is one of the, I guess, the second time that they collaborated, but they like famously get along really well together. And one of the reasons that is because, and you mentioned this about Spielberg, is that he has a love for classic cinema, which like really shines through, especially strong in Indiana Jones. But a lot of the films he draws from these like, you know, pulp serials, like all of these sort of like classic things. There's like all these intentional references. And so working with Williams makes a lot of sense as a choice, because Williams is also really interested in classical music. All of his scores, and you can hear that a lot, all of his scores are like really heavily influenced by classical composers. So the music, the score for Jaws, that da-dun, 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 is taken from 3 places, but most notably he took it from Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which is like most famously played, possibly at least for like today's audiences, in Fantasia. The dinosaur battle where like the T-Rex and the Stegosaurus or whatever are fighting each other. You can hear it so clearly in that scene.
So the takeaway is that not only hip-hoppers sample each other, but the people who score our movies do.
They do. You can like almost hear like this is the start of John Williams. And then when you listen to like Star Wars and Indiana Jones and E.T. and all of those movies, you can almost hear some of Jaws, like some of the elements making their way into his like into the other movies.
I will say my biggest criticisms of Jaws, like coming away from it, it is, I acknowledge, just absolutely a fabulous movie. Representation of women is not the best, and the representation all around is just say very reflective of the time. I would just say there actually were certain scenes where I felt the dialogue was just kind of like, here.
And now we're gonna do this because of this, just in case you weren't paying attention.
And yeah, there is some exposition as well, especially around like some of the shark stuff. It's just like, okay, audience, everyone in the room knows this, but now you need to know this too.
In case you forgot your basic facts about sharks, here's like a long list of them, just so we don't forget that sharks are brutal killing machines like that have remained unchanged for 650 million years.
Except they're not, and humans need to stop killing sharks because they're actually wonderful creatures. We kill way more sharks than sharks kill humans. I almost said that well. What would be your biggest criticism of Jaws, though, coming away from it fresh as a 26, 7-year-old man?
My biggest criticism of Jaws is actually that very thing that you just did your little bit about. It creates factions of people who are curious and want to know more about sharks and are like interested in shark behavior and shark preservation. But it also, like, there are a lot of people who blame Jaws for over hunting of sharks, and that's my biggest critic. I know there's like criticisms of the film, of the actual creation, of the production of the film, but I think my biggest criticism is just that for a long time it contributed to the overfishing of sharks.
Can you tell your shark story where you lied about working with sharks? I think people will find it as funny as I do.
Okay, audience, here is my bit for you. Daniel and I went to the same college together. One year we lived on the same floor, and so we were doing one of those, get to know each other circles with everyone where you're all sharing fun facts about each other. Except everyone's going around and they're telling me the most boring facts about them. It's like, I have size 10 feet. I'm right-handed. Who gives a shit? Good news is that I was like one of the last people to go. So as they're going around the table, I have all this time to think about my fun fact that I'm going to share with people. So it finally comes around to me, and someone has just told me about the fact that their hair parts on the right. And I go, that's cool. I worked with sharks over the summer. And they're like, wow, really? That's so cool. And I was like, yeah, I live close to the Baltimore Aquarium, so I applied for this internship, and I did this whole thing where I was working with sharks over the summer. It's on like a rolling basis. You never know what you're going to get, but I happen to be like scuba certified, and I got to work with sharks. None of this is true. This is all entirely false. Unfortunately, I don't know, for me or for the other person, someone in the group is like, oh my God, you got to work with sharks? It's like my dream to work with sharks. Can you help me set up a way to like get into this program? And I was like, absolutely, yes, I can. I did not then do that. I avoided him for a year.
Just so he could maintain this lie that everyone around him then had to also maintain. Repeatedly, I was asked by this person, like, oh, like, does Noah have any update about that? And I'd be like, I don't know what's going on with that. It's crazy. I'll make sure to find ways to squeeze in more Noah stories whenever I can. But now I get to ask you, Noah, do you think this movie should be remade in 2020?
I actually don't want it to be remade. I really like having this film as a classic. I like having this as something to look back on as a staple, as sort of a reference point for what good horror movies or good thriller movies can be. And the other reason that I don't want it to be remade is that there's such an over-reliance on computer animation these days.
I was about to say the same reason. There's no way you'd talk a studio into doing this practically again, and I've seen every computer animated shark cinema can offer, and none of them are as effective as this prop.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I love what we're able to do with computer animation. I've been going back through and watching the Marvel movies, and so seeing some of the backgrounds for those, where they're in like the dark dimension, or like they're in, Ant-Man gets shrunk down or whatever, like that's really cool. Those are backgrounds that you could not do probably with practical effects. But I get so tired of seeing, like, I love having something that has weight to it and you can tell is actually literally chewing the scenery. Like, I love that. And I really don't think it's just not practical, no pun intended. You wouldn't be able to convince a production company or a director to use practical elements to remake.
Even like Dennis Vanilla would have a hard time getting that done.
You call him Dennis Vanilla? Is that your name for him?
Everyone tells me no matter what I say that I say his name wrong, so I've just given up. He's Dennis Villeneuve to me now. I completely agree with you. I think remaking this movie would be basically a crime. Something like 12 Angry Men, you could like reframe in perhaps an interesting way and then do it extremely high quality with like the best of the best. I don't see any possible reason or purpose for this to be remade. I do stand by all the praise I gave it, but I don't think it's in the top 100 movies ever made, especially when you take in the last couple decades of film, which have seen some truly sensational entries. I agree, it's a great movie. Maybe it's a damn near perfect one, but it's still just a kind of simple movie, and it's not saying anything to me that's super deep, and I'm not emotionally transformed by it. So I would say this is maybe in my top 200, but it's not even probably close to my top 100.
That is so interesting because I respectfully disagree with you. I think this is one of those movies that I would probably keep on the list, maybe because I was so taken aback by it. I think my standards were kind of low, and so I was really, no pun intended, blown out of the water by it. But yeah, I thought it did such a good job across the board, and I think it has enough sway, just enough influence in terms of like the other similar films that it spawned, that I would keep it on the list. I don't know that I would have it as high on the list as it is right now. I think it's somewhere around like 50 or something. So I would probably move it down several tiers, but I would keep it on the AFI list.
Thank you so much, Noah, for agreeing to sit down and watch Jaws. And everyone else, let us know what we should watch from the AFI Top 100 for next week. Like and subscribe if you have not already. And Noah, do you have anything to add here?
Politics, am I right?
Bye!